evening. Thank you very much for joining us tonight to hear photographer Ed Kashi. My name is Alessandra Moctezuma, and I'm the gallery director here at San Diego Mesa College. And first off, I just wanted to thank a few people that really help us with our gallery program. I want to thank all of the students in museum studies that have been working very hard for the exhibit and the reception. So I want to thank them, and many of them are here tonight. And I also want to thank Pat Vine, the gallery coordinator, for all of her work. So we're very pleased tonight to have photojournalist Ed Kashi. His exhibit, Shadows and Light in the Niger Delta, is right now showing in our gallery. I'm just going to read a little bit about him. Ed Kashi is a photojournalist, filmmaker, and educator dedicated to documenting the social and political issues that define our times. A sensitive eye and an intimate relationship to his subject are signatures of his work. Kashi's complex imagery has been recognized for its compelling rendering of the human condition. I take on issues that stir my passions about the state of humanity and our world, and I deeply believe in the power of still images to change people's minds. I'm driven by this fact that the work of photojournalists and documentary photographers can have a positive impact on the world. The access people give to their lives is precious, as well as imperative for this important work to get done. Their openness brings with it a tremendous sense of responsibility to tell the truth, but also to honor their stories. Kashi's images have been published and exhibited worldwide. His innovative approach to photography and filmmaking produced the Iraqi Kurdistan flipbook. Using stills and moving images in a moving image format, this creative and thought-provoking form of visual storytelling has been shown in many film festivals and as part of a series of exhibitions on the Iraq War at the George Eastman House. Also, an 8-year personal project completed in 2003, Aging in America, The Years Ahead, created a traveling exhibition, an award-winning documentary film, a website, and a book, which was named one of the best photo books of 2003 by American Photo. Along with numerous awards, including honors from Pictures of the Year International, World Press Foundation, and American Photography, Kashi's editorial assignments and personal projects have generated 4 books. In 2008, his latest book was published, Curse of the Black Gold, 50 Years of Oil in the Niger Delta. And we actually have that book available if you want to purchase it today. So we have that here. I discovered Ed Kashi's work actually from this book. And I think that it's so important in this day and age. I know we are going through a difficult crisis here in the United States, but I think that's why it is so important to create links to the world around us and to reach beyond our communities and see how our decisions impact the rest of the people. 50% of the oil in the United States comes from Nigeria. And I think that it's crucial to have an exhibit like this to make us aware of conditions, living conditions in that country, and also make us aware of how we can make a difference, even by just knowing what's going on. Well, let's give a round of applause for Ed.
Thank you, Alessandra and Pat Vine and the Mesa College, and thank you all for being here. One thing I have to correct, though, was you said we get 50% of our oil from the Niger Delta. No, we take 50% of the oil that the Niger Delta produces.
Okay.
Big difference, all right. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in Iraq. But although the irony is we don't actually take very much oil from Iraq. So, but that's another subject that we can talk about. Yet. Yeah. That's right. We're battling the Chinese for it. Right. So, which is actually not a joke. That's true. But anyway, thank you all for being here. And tonight I want to share my work from this project. How many folks? I'm going to turn the light on. Sorry. Sorry. Ah! Just want to get how many folks here have seen the exhibition or seen the multimedia piece? Just so I want to get some idea. Okay. All right. Okay, ready? Lights off. You can go back to sleep now. I want to start by sharing the multimedia piece with you. I just want to get an idea of how many of you might have seen it already, and then look at some pictures and share some stories and opinions and observations that I have about this subject. I spent 3 years working on this project, and the way that I work is it's like I'm always searching for a personal project to be involved in. For me, as a photojournalist, an artist, a creative soul, but actually primarily as a journalist, as a reporter, as someone who has dedicated his life to trying to find stories that are either underreported or that I feel that we need to know more about. If I'm not involved in some kind of a personal project, I never feel quite whole. It doesn't matter how much money I'm making, how busy I am, where I'm traveling. None of that stuff matters if I'm not engaged in something that I'm passionate about. And for everyone here, I just encourage you, I know there are a lot of students here and a lot of young folks here, but this is for people of all ages. It's so important, to find passion in your life. That's the way to have a life that's well lived. So what I want to do is let's start with this piece. I was told if I just hit this button, it'll work.
I come from a community of farmers and fishermen. People were fishing to survive. As a child growing up, there was no fish being brought from outside the community. Today, there is not a single person in our community who you can describe as a professional fisherman because there is no fish to depend on.
This share of paradise, the delta of my birth, reels from an immeasurable wound. Barrels of alchemical droughts flow from this earth to the unquestioning world that lights up its life in a blind trust. The inheritance I sat on for centuries now crushes my body and soul.
We have enough wealth. How many thousand barrels of oil like this siphoning from our land every day? And how much is coming to us? Nothing.
The oil companies themselves are not willing to come and sit down. At this moment, they make fantastic profit that nobody knows about. They produce the oil, they report to government, they sell the oil, and government sits down in Abuja only to receive the profit.
A lot of the money that is being generated from the oil revenue is being shared by people who are in power and their cohorts. At the moment, there is too much of official corruption that is going on. If the government cannot even address matters as basic as water to drink, sanitation, public education, then of course it's difficult.
No water, no light, no road. People are dying every day because of oil exploration.
The Niger Delta people have been denied their rights to property. No Niger Delta person can lay claim that that piece of land given to him by his ancestors is his as of right, because the government had put in place a decree that says that property, that land, that forest, that river no longer belongs to the person because they want to take control of oil and gas. Ken Saro had mobilized his people to say no to pollution, to say no to degradation, to say no to injustice. It is that shout of no, that resistance, that the federal government will not want to tolerate. And that was why they hanged him.
Things have gotten worse since Sarajevo was murdered.
The law doesn't say that because you have the permission of the federal government to exploit for oil, it still does not permit you to pollute my environment.
If Shell, Ajib, Elf, Chevron are allowed to be businesses, and we hold them accountable for any ecological violence or moral interruption, the communities can go to court and get justice. Right now, they cannot.
The oil economy is killing almost every other sector that you find in the Niger Delta.
We have witnessed a clear disruption of a sense of community as we had in our villages and towns. Communities have been basically robbed of their means of survival.
We are tired of this situation. One looking for job, no job. You go out for fishing, don't get fish. An hungry man is an angry man. So any moment from now, a dangerous thing can happen.
They can shut down oil production in Nigeria. The effect of that on the federal government will be grave. The government will collapse.
Niger Deltans have been talking for years, but when men carried its own weapon, the government is shaking everywhere. So that means the government respects violence, not dialogue.
We have a very repressive government. We have a military that is out to kill. Such a military will go to any length in wiping out communities that occupy a platform and they have it closed down.
We are the Niger Delta soldiers. We are angry that our brother has been killed.
The average Niger Delta is not afraid of death. And if he must die a hero, not a coward. There are different phases of struggle. We are still using dialogue. Let us see if these people will look at things in our view. But if they do not, everybody, even the women, not only the men, even the women will carry weapon. And when it starts, until we have our freedom, we won't stop.
So, thank you. In recent years, actually it's been about 8 years now that I've started to work in video and moving images and kind of, in a sense, expanding my use of the language of photography and the visual language of communication. And so, even though I still primarily work as a still photographer, I'm increasingly incorporating the sound of my subject through audio, or just shooting video or working with a videographer along with my stills. You know, in this time we're living in, with YouTube and just the proliferation of visual imagery and visual communication, I feel it's a very exciting time where now I can incorporate the voice of my subject in a way that I was never able to do that just as a still photographer. So anyway, the Niger Delta, it is nothing new for foreigners or for outsiders to come and take a resource from them. It began in the 16 and 1700s with the slave trade. In Bonny Island in the Niger Delta, it was the second busiest port for slaves being taken to the New World. And then in the 1800s, palm oil. You know, these are things that, I mean, most people don't even really realize that we're burning Nigerian fuel right now to have this light on. And the cars that you drove in, you were burning Nigerian oil to get here. We take 50% of their oil. I think they're either the 6th or 7th largest supplier of oil to the United States. But in the 1800s, it was palm oil, controlled by the British, who had colonized Nigeria. And then in the 20th century, petroleum. They discovered petroleum in 1956, the Shell Oil Company, which is actually a British subsidiary of Shell Oil, which is a Dutch-owned company. So it's been over 300 years the people of the Niger Delta have had to deal with and cooperate with, and quite frankly, I think that's why there's so much corruption there, that you have local people who have had to collude with outsiders coming in to take their valuable resources, whether it was slaves, whether it was palm oil, and now it's petroleum. And I mean, for me, that's where I see the sort of ingrained corruption that you hear about, and I will testify to absolutely being true. I would say Nigeria, and the Niger Delta in particular, is probably about the most corrupt place I've ever worked. I've worked in over 60 countries. You know, I never pay to get access. I never pay subjects as a journalist. In the Niger Delta, they will laugh at you if you don't cooperate with that. And at first, you know, that's why I like to start off by talking about this history of outsiders coming in to take from them. Because at first I was indignant about, you know, I'm not going to pay you so that I can come into your village and take pictures of the kids playing, or I'm not going to pay you so that I can, whatever, photograph the oil well in your village. But they would laugh at me, no matter how much I got on my high horse, because this is what they've been doing for hundreds of years. And in a weird way, I came to understand it, not respect it, but I came to understand it, that's how things work there. So, oil has brought really only, I think only misery, certainly to the people, to the average person in the Niger Delta. There are obviously people, you know, Nigerians who are getting very rich, not just Nigerians, who are getting very rich from oil. I mean, think about it. This piece we produced in March of last year, and the figure was 600 billion. It's already over $700 billion of oil wealth that has been produced since 1958, when the first oil was pumped out of the land. But what has happened, and this is the case in so many places in the world where there is oil, I think really except for isolated instances, the Arab Gulf states, because their populations are small and homogeneous, and maybe some other places in the world, but oil really brings misery to its local populations. We've done actually probably in the big picture a decent job. I don't know how people from Louisiana and Texas would, I mean, certainly Alaskans seem to be happy about oil because they get, what, a few $1,000s a year as a kickback, you know, if you're a citizen of Alaska. But also, we've done a somewhat decent job in the United States of protecting the land. I guess Exxon Valdez would be a bad example of that. But in a place like Nigeria, it's a daily grinding problem. You know, you have the oil works going through the villages and the communities. I mean, this is incredibly dangerous. It's also it's a tropical area where, you know, these pipelines corrode, and no matter how well they're taken care of, and they're not taken care of very well. So you have spills, and you have, you know, explosions. You have people trying to steal the oil as well, which is a big problem. So oil has brought actually backward development. I mean, these are the toilets and these are the bathrooms of these people. This is what $700 billion has brought to them. This is crazy in my mind, you know. And also for me, the fact that we take so much of their oil, we have a responsibility. At least you have a responsibility to know about this, at the very least, you know. And for me, this work is very much about advocacy and about trying to educate and raise awareness about this situation. And in the sort of globalized world we're living in, you know, hopefully make some connections for you guys. You know, it certainly happened for me. That's why I committed so much time and energy and the risks I took to do this work. That we have to understand that it does matter what is going on with these people halfway around the world in Africa. It does matter. And if there's some way for us to make a difference by getting involved with NGOs or foundations, or at the very least spreading the word and getting the message out, I think it's just incumbent upon us. So the Niger Delta traditionally was a place of fishermen and farmers, as the piece talked about. But as you can see, you know, the pollution in the waters and the disruption of the fisheries through the oil works has decimated the fishing industry. And as it was even at its peak, it was mostly subsistence. It was not like they had a big export industry of fishing. And, you know, the farming was mostly subsistence farming. So now you have a situation where it's interesting, they didn't used to eat meat. This was an interesting thing that I learned for those of you who, there's very few people in this room who were alive during the Biafran War, but it was in the 60s, late 60s, I believe, and it was a war between, a separatist war in this part of Nigeria. And someone was telling me about how when Nigeria is half Muslim, half Christian, the Muslims are mostly in the north, and when the Nigerian armies came to this area to fight, they were meat eaters, because they came from the north, and they brought with them this tradition of eating meat, which prior to whatever 40 years ago, you would rarely eat meat if you were a Niger Deltan. You got your protein from fish. So that was very interesting how these larger factors kind of change habits, you know, eating habits in this case. And this is an example of an oil spill, it's a relatively small oil spill, but for this farmer, it's huge because it's affected the majority of his farmlands. This is in Ogoniland where Ken Saro-Wiwa comes from, or came from. I tracked this over a 3-week period, and at first I heard there was a capped oil well that was leaking. We went and it was just like a puddle of oil. We came back a week later. It was a lake of oil. We came back a week later and we actually sort of, believe it or not, had to risk our lives to get to the scene. And then there was this huge conflagration of this where it had caught fire. And it took, I believe, almost a month for Shell to negotiate with the local youth, because you have a lot of angry young men, very angry young men who are armed and are pissed off, and they almost took us when we came to make these pictures, who would not allow Shell to come in unless they paid them. I mean, can you imagine that happening? It's like crazy. It's off of the coast of Santa Barbara, an oil platform catches fire, and the local people don't let the company come in to clean it until they pay them. I mean, but this is the kind of, you know, the corruption and you know, the sort of the dysfunction of civil society really in this place. This is another dramatic situation. This is an oil flare. Usually we see vertical flaring with oil, and this is a horizontal flaring out over a pond. Maybe the flare, it might be hard to tell in this picture, is maybe, you know, 20 yards, let's say 50, 60 feet behind her. and where I was photographing from, like the hair on my arms was singed. It was so hot, and there was this film all over me. And to think that every day these women from this village come and bake their tapioca, which is made from cassava, a root vegetable like a large yam, and it's their staple of their diet, to bake. So as I said, this is like baking a cake with the tailpipe of your car. And how much would it cost for Shell Oil to build a communal oven for these people? $500, $1,000? I mean, these are the sort of inequities, this is the sort of social injustice and economic injustice that I saw, which compelled me to come back, to return, for over a 3-year period and build this body of work to create the book and the exhibition that you see now. And, just to backtrack this, I was introduced to this work through Professor Michael Watts at Berkeley, who I lived in San Francisco, then we moved 4 years ago back east to New Jersey, but I was living in San Francisco then, and I actually befriended him through our kids were in the same class. You never know where opportunity will come from in life. Right? You never know. Anyway, and he saw my work from Iraq, and he said, hey, you want to go, would you work with me in the Niger Delta? And it was one of those, like, I said yes, but I'll believe it when it happens, and it happened, and now look what's happened, So you never know in life where opportunity will come from, and for me, this has been a life-changing opportunity, not just another assignment or another project. It's profound how it's actually changed my life, and allowed me, I feel, to create something that's really important. Erosion is a huge problem. This is along the Atlantic Ocean, the coast. This is a natural process where they live, that there will be erosion. But when the local people are losing their houses, and then literally 100 yards down the beach, the oil company is building a 25-foot high berm of rocks, with grading to protect their oil well. It pisses these local people off, and it makes them feel like, it makes them feel angry against the oil companies. And it's this kind of stuff that is happening there, which it would be very hard to have that happen here, because we're far from perfect here, but at least we have structures to bring lawsuits. We have the media to point out things that are going on. There is there is a due process that can kick in here. However imperfect it is, and however much the rich always end up winning, there is at least a chance. Here, there is no chance. These people have nobody to go to stand up for them and to fight for their rights. And when they did have someone, Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was articulate, he was a writer, he was a journalist, he believed in nonviolence, he preached nonviolence, and they hanged him. That's why you have the guys with the guns now. I mean, it's the same thing, I've said this before and people have been pissed off, but it's exactly what happened in Ireland, and it's the same thing that has happened in a much more dramatic way with the Palestinians and the Israelis, that if there is not, at some point, if you do not resolve these issues, then they're just going to get more and more violent, regardless of whose side you're on or who you think is right or wrong. I get pissed off about this stuff. Because there's so much goodness. I know it sounds so cliche and silly, but it's true. The Nigerians are very bright people. They're incredible energy and entrepreneurial. And as I've said, an educated Nigerian is a world-class mind. World-class mind. They have Nobel laureates. They have great artists. They have economists. As a matter of fact, in that multimedia piece, the poem, that gentleman who recited the poem. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, which is an upper middle class community, but quite diverse. It's like 35% non-white, 12 miles west of New York City. I had been detained in 2006 for 4 days when I was working on this, and it was broadcast in the local news. And so I get a call from this guy, Uche, who's a Nigerian, who lives in my community, who is an economist with Goldman Sachs in New York City. And he wanted to meet me, and so he had this amazing voice. So I said, hey, would you please contribute to this piece by doing this voiceover of this, famous poem. But, the Nigerians are amazing. Like all people, there's such potential. But if this is where they go to school, the teachers don't show up. In the state of Bayelsa, where I took this picture, it's one of the main oil-producing states. From oil alone, they get $1.5 billion a month from the federal government in oil subsidy. $1.5 billion a month. And for 6 months in 2006, none of their schools were open because they didn't pay the teachers, but the teachers didn't want to go to these outlying areas to teach. So many of the schools I saw had no roofs. It's just unconscionable. Another irony, like Iraq, there's constant blackouts. These are oil-producing countries, and yet they don't have enough energy for their own people. This was one actually positive thing I saw, the French oil giant Total, and it's the only oil company that gave me access, actually. For years, the oil companies have been involved in these community development projects, and it's great, and they mean well, and they try, but it's a very tough environment because there's very little trust between the communities and the oil companies, and often the oil companies don't have the follow-through that's really necessary to create sustainable development. But they built this birthing center for women. So instead of the women giving birth literally on the dirt floors of their homes, of their huts, they could come to this clinic, and it's very rudimentary by our standards, but still major improvement with nurse midwives and doctors on call. So, and also it's very important. I've talked about how when I first started the project, I was ready to skewer the oil companies. I figured, it's their fault. Well, you know what? It's not just their fault, and ultimately, it's the Nigerian government that I feel bears the greatest blame, because it is the government that is the steward of the people. It's the government that is the protector of its people. It's the government that is the steward of the resources. And if you can't trust your government, it always, when we talk here about cutting taxes and reducing government, people don't. It brings tears to my eyes when I work on stories about American policemen and paramedics and firemen. And when I see the incredible dedication and the fact that you can call 911 and in a very short amount of time, you can guarantee 95% of the time they're going to show up and they're going to know what to do. If I had a heart attack driving on the streets of the Niger Delta, I'd be dead unless there was some good soul who gathered me up and drove me to a hospital. And what kind of hospital might it be? And this is nothing against the Nigerian medical establishment. I'm just saying, this is the reality. So how do you get those great resources? I'm sorry, you gotta calm me down. But no, because it makes me angry. We take these things for granted. We take these things for granted. We are so fortunate to have these resources in the United States. Not just in the United States, there's other countries in the world that also have these structures, these civil society, these structures that allow us to live a life that we often take for granted. And I'll tell you, when you're in a place where there is no 911, and in fact, if you were robbed, or God forbid, if you were raped, the last person you would call is the police, because you wouldn't trust them. It makes you realize, again, not every policeman and fireman here is perfect. There are corrupt policemen in America. But I shouldn't have had that coffee before I started. Somebody's got to care, right? This stuff is real, though. Stuff is real. So, there still is fishing. It's interesting, the traditional fishermen in the Niger Delta are in these little dugout boats that, it was funny, it would be comical if I tried to stand in them because I'd invariably either topple them or fall out. But, and they catch very small fish. Again, so it was subsistence fishing. And now they have to go out to the ocean. And again, this is not something traditionally they had the boats for or they even had the skills for. But this is where they have to go now to get their fish. This is like a smokehouse to smoke the krill that just been caught. This was one of the most horrific scenes I ever have experienced. I think for about 3 months after this, I did not eat meat. But this is the main abattoir or slaughterhouse in the Niger Delta. And it's just brutal, brutal, brutal. They just line up the animals, they tie them together, and the guy just goes and slits their throats. They are dying in each other's blood and feces and urine, and then they use and then they burn the carcasses to get rid of the fur, the hair in burning old tires. One wonderful thing that happened, this picture was published in the as part of the story that appeared in the National Geographic, and about 2 months after the story appeared, this woman named Betty from upstate New York called us and said, can I get a print of that boy and all that and his name? And we thought, she's sort of a whack job or whatever. And anyway, but I did. Sorry, even the sensitive can be cynical sometimes. Don't get me started on cynicism. No. And about 6 months later, she contacted us, and she had, through her church, found this boy through his local church, and sent him $500, and he's enrolled in school. So again, there's the power to this work, or there are people who care, and even though this is one very, very small, isolated, one-off, good deed, it's still, we put a lot of those together and we got something going. So these are the guys, some of the guys who benefit. This is, as I call them, a newly anointed oil king. Basically, if I can claim that I, through some lineage, whether it's real or fabricated, that I am the king, or my family is the ruler of an area of the Delta, whatever amount of oil is produced out of that area, then I get a percentage of the profits. So again, even if it's a small area, you're still talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. And so it's good to be a king there. So apparently this guy had done this. This was taken in 2004, this picture. Well, 2 years ago, no, last year, he was actually caught for like embezzling or he was caught to be a fraud and he was arrested. These are politicians and chiefs. Sometimes it's one and the same. And again, not all these guys are bad. There's a bigger dynamic that goes on here. And again, it's 300 years of this entrenched corruption. How do they grow out of this? How do they grow out of this? How do they learn to serve their people? And then you have the tribal issues that are involved. This is an Ogoni woman who claims to be the queen of the Ogoni people. That's what she said. Everyone, when I showed them these pictures, they said, "Ha!" Right. This is a church group. This is in the city of Wari, which is the second largest city in the Niger Delta. Very embattled, poorly developed place, but there's been so much violence there. This church group got together and they were sort of dancing through the streets, sort of against violence, trying to stop violence. And I gave a gallery lecture yesterday, and the gallery talk, and a Nigerian woman who teaches here, actually, I did not get her name, remarked about, well, this is all great, but you're only talking about negativity, and she made a great point, because one of the things that I also observed and learned about the Nigerians are that they're actually very happy people. They're very, and I don't mean that in a stupid, simple way. I mean, they're genuinely hearty and happy and kind of happy-go-lucky, people, and it's incredible to see that. They're not saddled with all the neuroses and worries that we are. This is on a, most of the Niger Delta is only you reach through boats, because it's, I think, the second largest delta in Africa, and the boat rides can be 15 minutes, they can be 3 hours, and there are these 26-foot fiberglass boats, with a motor or two, and it always rains there, and so when it rains, everybody pulls this tarp over, and you just sort of sit there on the boat while it's raining. And when it's raining really hard, I started to go insane, because you have this constant pattern. But anyway, so this is there's no manipulation with the color here. It was a green tarp, and this was, everyone's just sort of under, but I love this moment, her eyes, and so this is typical, this is tiny little fishing enclave. Literally, these are just mud huts with, banana leaf or straw roofs, and then you've got the oil works going through it, and then the water's all polluted. This is in the town of Okrika, which is out near Port Harcourt, the capital of the Niger Delta. Port Harcourt has about 4 million people. And again, these oil works just going right through the community. This is a wedding ceremony passing by, billiards on the street. So they bring offerings of cassava and yams and bananas and stuff. Such a beautiful people. And this is a funeral. This was, you can really, I'm convinced that, I'm convinced that reggae music comes from Nigeria originally, and also, this could be virtually a scene out of New Orleans in terms of a funeral procession where they play music. It's so clear the connection, the people, the Africans who were brought to places like the Caribbean, or Jamaica, and that ended up here came from Nigeria, and some of those traditions that live on in Nigeria clearly have filtered into the culture of these areas. This is a harvest festival. It's typical of how things are here. So at the end of these long, red things, are these nails about this big. And so the guy would chase people, the kids would run laughing hysterically. He would chase people, and then he'd go like this. And so these things would come crashing down. And it was sort of, I didn't see what was so funny about possibly getting a nail. This is also, this was a New Year's festival, and in a lot of the Niger Delta, they go by a lunar calendar, so this was actually the middle of August. But it's the new year, and it's related to the patterns of the harvest. But again, it's very intense and kind of raw and sort of violent. They make these huge reeds and they burn them and they bring them as an offering to the king. But meanwhile, from my perspective, because people are sort of drunk and high and it's a little wild, you have to watch out. Mr. Biggs, it's a national chain. It's like McDonald's, Nigerian McDonald's. So this is the Christian part of Nigeria, and it is one of the most Christian places I've ever been, really, in the world. Very, Pentecostalism, very intense, very vibrant. And then you have these mixes of sort of African, Christian African churches. This is a street preacher in the middle of a market. So then an election rally. It's virtually impossible to photograph Nigerian military. As it is, I sort of took this picture from the hip, so to speak, or my chest. There's a number of places in the world where the militaries just do not allow. It's not like the American military. You're not allowed to take pictures. This was a young militant who had been attacked and hacked by government forces. And this is a guy who had been caught in this was the Nigerian military went into this poor neighborhood of Port Harcourt and razed a whole community, a very poor area with 3,000 people lived, and he was asleep and was burned. This is the aftermath of that attack where they leveled the whole area of Port Harcourt. And these are members of men. These guys, I got to spend time with them on a few occasions. It was very intense, very tightly controlled, kind of, waiting around sometimes for days for a phone call to my fixer, my guide, fixers are sort of guide interpreters, saying, okay, get in a car, I'll come and take you, kind of a shadowy sort of a situation. And then, they let me spend some time with them, and then they drop me off, and then they go away, and that was it. This was an small oil platform that they had attacked. But these guys are responsible for shutting down a quarter of the Nigerian oil industry. The messed up thing is that they one of the ways they get money is from stealing or what's called bunkering oil. So there's no one who's really clean in this situation. So they're well aware that if they make an attack tonight, take a hostage, destroy an oil platform, price of oil around the world goes up, and it does, because it responds to this, because Nigeria is so important. And then not only do the oil companies make more money, the Nigerian government makes more money, and MEND makes more money. So this is why it's intractable. It's so hard to figure out a way to resolve this situation. And that's the last picture. All right. Thank you. I think we have time for some questions.
Did you turn the light on?
Yeah, let's turn the light on.
Sorry.
Did I piss any of you off?
One pissed off, but not you.
Well, I don't know. There might be some people here who didn't like the thing. You got it.
The group men, was their intent to help the people, or were they intentionally going out to make money?
No, I think that they genuinely grew out of like a grassroots movement. You know, that they, in a way, they symbolize the frustration, right? So 10 years ago, there was Ken Saro-Wiwa, nonviolent, very straightforward. You know, share the resource, the profits. Don't destroy our land and don't attack our villages, right? And then they kill him because they can do this with impunity, right? Between the oil companies and the Nigerian government, and I'm sure the U.S. government and the British government didn't shed many tears either, right? As long as the oil flows, right? And so then, 10 years later, surprise, surprise, you have an armed group that is using, you know, political rhetoric that would, you know, be commonly used, you know, very, very. It's fascinating. There's this guy Jomo Gabomo. I mean, I have emails from him yesterday. If you get on his email list, it's the journalist. He's like the voice of men, and it's very articulate, you know, the things that he says and all that. But I think what's happened is, like so many things there, that they've gotten corrupted too. And then there are people who, there are groups in their, like, you know, basically like criminal gangs who, in their name, will take a hostage. You know, will take a foreign, like an expat, an oil worker hostage. Not to hurt them. I don't know if they've ever hurt a hostage, but it's to get money, it's to get attention. So it's kind of fragmented, but there still is a core group of guys and men who are really fighting for, you know, equitable distribution of the wealth, you know, cleaning up the land, the environmental degradation, and also, yeah, just to stop harassing the population.
Do they spread that wealth, or does it stay within that?
No, I think as of now, it's just, you know, they're keeping it. And,
how do you go beyond just making people aware? Like, what is it? Is there something that, like, we can do, or? Because I know you said that it's pretty much Nigerian government. That's like the problem, I guess. But what is it that I guess we can do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the oil companies are also certainly part of the problem.
Right.
It's just that they're so powerful that it's very hard to knock them off their stride, you know. And look, the reality is we need oil. We need the oil companies to do a great job. I mean, I want to be clear is that, which is a reason that the sooner we can get past oil, the better. We desperately need to figure out, we need solutions to our energy needs so we can move beyond the era of oil. But for now, for today, for next week, for the next 10 years, we need oil. And so we just need, I just hope the oil companies will do their job as best they can and protect the environments and the places they work. And, you know, all the things that are so obvious. I don't need to, you know, they're so obvious. And you know, make lots of profits if you do a great job. I mean, I have nothing against organizations doing great work and making money off of their work.
Right.
You know, so anyway, in terms of what I've tried to do is I've tried to get this work in the hands of people who know a lot more than I do about this subject. So, activists, NGOs, foundations, academics, like Oxfam America has created an 8-panel exhibition of this work that they're taking to 10 universities around the country. There are ways beyond having this work appear in the media, which is of course also important to some degree, to get it in more directly into the hands of activists and organizations that can then not only teach but also can involve people. All right, and I created a website, curseoftheblackgoldbook.com. It's a mouthful, but that was the only URL we could get this close. It's like an aggregated site where there's also links. If you go there, you can find links. There's a whole page that Professor Watts wrote, 2 pages of what you can do to get involved. So if you want to get involved, that's certainly a jumping off point to sort of learn more about beyond the photography and my rhetoric and all that, is to really, to hear from a more, if you like, objectified, here's what you can do. Here are the organizations that are involved, that are trying to make change, both here and also in Nigeria. Because there are NGOs in Nigeria that are also trying to, environmental groups and so forth that are trying to get the government and get the oil companies to clean up their act.
A couple of questions. What does NGO stand for?
Non-governmental organization.
How long were you there for?
Over a 3-year period, I went 4 times, and I spent about a month in each trip.
So the most recent pictures are probably like 5 months old?
No. June 2006.
Oh, very well. Okay, well then.
It takes about a year to create that
I
book.
guess my next question isn't as applicable as I thought, though. But do you feel hopeful that? Did you see just after reviewing the history of what from 1955 until now that things actually got worse over the past 8-year administration, and do you feel hopeful that things, once we reach some kind of homeostasis here, that we'll be able to go in and actually help to clean things up and have a more, we did have a very oil driven power going on in the past.
No, I think I understand what you're getting at. I don't think you can place any blame or whatever on the Bush administration for what's going on in the Niger Delta. Well, no. I think what you can say is that they did absolutely nothing to make it better. But I don't think they did anything to make it worse.
To buy and there's nothing to sell, and somebody places so much power in that. Bush was an oil.
I know. How do you stop Exxon? Seriously.
Stop buying. You wrote me on it, but we're in a position now where we have a leader. We have a very strong leader, very intelligent. So, do you feel that hopeful in that sense? You might be going in a different direction.
What way I feel hopeful? I totally respect. It's great what you're saying. The way I feel hopeful is, in a sense, the same way the Bush administration brought despair. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to make this partisan or political, because there's people of all stripes here. But I'm speaking from my heart, and I'm being sincere. So take it for what it is. But what I saw firsthand, going to Iraq 6 times, going to Afghanistan, going to a lot of places throughout the world in the last 8 years, is that the kind of leadership we had set an extraordinarily bad example for other leaders around the world. It basically said, if you want to be a thug, if you want to rule with impunity, you can do it. And one of the things about America that, I'm so thankful that my parents came from Iraq in 1946, actually. I'm first generation American. And I'm so thankful they came to America, because I got to grow up in a place where we have all these tremendous values and freedoms and opportunity and all that. And I'm digressing here, but what I've always felt, and in a sense maybe this is the spirit that Obama has captured, and hopefully he will be successful and not stumble or not turn out to be a creep, but what he embodies is what our greatest leaders in a sense have embodied, which is that he has reflected to the world not just hope, but like a better way to do things. That's what America is made up of, everyone from all over the world, right? Right. That's what's so amazing about America. We're made up of people from everywhere. And so, in a sense, I've always saw America as this sort of like social laboratory, or if that's the right way of putting it, where it's like, if there is hope for humanity, I do feel it rests here. And I'm not saying that as a chauvinist. I'm saying that just, I think a lot of people in the world feel that way, you know? So, woo, am I really going off on another tangent? But anyway, so I do hope that this example he will set, and our government hopefully will set now, is one where dialogue comes into play, where it's not okay to trample over your people, and you know, that you have to respect human rights. But you know, he's one guy, and we are only one country on this earth. This is interesting, you know, I had a talk like this in New York City last September, and it happened to be the week that the UN was in session, so we ended up getting quite a crowd, and you know, we had this thing, actually Professor Watts was there was a Nigerian activist there, and this middle-aged gentleman got up and came to and he said, you know, let me do this right. Basically, he was saying, yeah, you know, you guys get together and you talk, you say all these sort of high-minded things, but the reality is that the world is run by a bunch of thugs. I mean, I think this is sort of reflecting what I believe this book or what you're trying to say. And he said, you know, I'm a lawyer and my clients have been Idi Amin, the Shah of Iran, and I'm thinking, I'm surprised you're admitting this, but anyway. And he was, you know, and he was there because of this UN thing, and I can't remember, some like really creepy government was his, but anyway, he was just saying, this is the reality. You guys can sit here and you can talk about all these high-minded, whatever, progressive things, but the reality is the world is run by a small group of people, and they're thugs, and they're just looking out for, you know, the greediness or the power, you know, they're protecting money and power and all that. So, you know, I still, though, would like to believe, and that there is another way to go about this, but, you know, you can only hope, you can only try. You know, but it's a huge mountain that we are fighting against, or that we're trying to scale. What we need leaders who are inspirational and who are hopefully only a little corrupt, not really corrupt, because I don't think there's any human organization on earth who is not at least a little corrupt, isn't that right? I mean, I think it's just part of human nature.
So from Iraq and Nigeria, and I know you got a lot going right now, but are you going to follow an oil trail, and where are you going next?
Well, I've been proposing for the last 2 years expanding this work to look at oil in the Gulf of Guinea. So that would include Chad, Cameroon, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and then Sao Tome and Principe, a very small island nation off the coast of Nigeria. And sort of, if you imagine Africa, the crook where Nigeria is, it's the Gulf of Guinea, and it's sort of West Africa, and there is a lot of oil there. And there is I mean, it's pretty much stated, the US government is looking at that place as, over the next 10 to 20 years, a safe place to get oil, as potentially the Middle East will either falls apart or continues to just be so problematic. So I thought it would be really wonderful and important to expand this work. Nigeria is by far the biggest player, and maybe the toughest one, but to expand that work and look at that region. So Angola is a huge, actually, because of MEND, Angola has now overtaken Nigeria as the largest producer of oil in Africa, which is the first time it's ever been. It's just last year that happened.
Angola
is now the largest exporter of oil, because Nigeria always held that position, or for the last 50 years, but because of MEND, they've really stopped a quarter of Nigeria's output. So, but yeah, Angola is a huge player. Chevron is major player in Angola.
And, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering if we could switch gears just a second and look at the photography.
Okay.
From a perspective.
Geez, I thought you were going to skewer me. You look really tough. Anyway, go ahead. I'd love to talk about photography. Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your creative photography needs versus your photojournalistic photographic needs, because it seems like some of the images are what I would think are purely photojournalistic, and it seems like some other ones could only be created. So I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about the differences in the ethics and all that entails.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, in a sense, I was talking about this yesterday in the gallery talk, that as a photojournalist or as a documentary photographer, you in a sense, you compromise your ability to always attain the greatest aesthetics. Like the example I give, I was working in India a lot last year, and one of the things we're doing on land acquisitions, people's land being taken away, is like every time they had a rally, they held it at noon. Noon in May in India is crazy hot. The light is horrible, but I couldn't have them reschedule it for 5 o'clock when the light was perfect. So you still have to go out there and you have to figure out, aesthetically, how do you tackle it? How do you, Nigeria was interesting. The classic thing for photographers, you wake up early in the morning, you get the great light, and you work, and then you set yourself up to be in the right place at the end of the day when the light's beautiful. Well, in the Niger Delta, most of the time it's overcast because it's this very tropical area. So I had to throw that out the window because sometimes at dead noon was the most beautiful light. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that in the way I approach things is I'm always driven by what are the elements, the storytelling elements, or the visual elements that will address the issue I'm trying to deal with. Where do I have to be to see that, to have it in front of me? Okay? And it could be a quiet, daily life kind of a moment, in a church or whatever, or it could be something more dramatic, like an event. And then I have to make sure I'm there. It's being at the right place at the right time. Hopefully the light is great, but it sometimes isn't. And sometimes it's really crappy situation, where it's sort of like, a lot of times, this is actually why it's wonderful to work in multimedia. And sometimes I wish I was a writer, because then I could just describe it, because it's visually a very bad situation. Like I'll know there's no way I can ever make a great picture out of this, but I still have to try to capture something. So does that answer your question?
Well, case in point, like the beautiful photograph of the oil lines going through the community and the girl with the umbrella walking across.
Right.
Like visually, did you see that and just wait? Because that's a piece of your story, these lines going through this community.
Right.
Did you just sit there and wait for this beautiful thing to happen?
No, actually,
or did you
and I
happen
almost
to walk across.
And 5 minutes after I took that picture, I almost got arrested again. But no, this is it's so benign, but the reality is
I'm just curious as to how.
No, what I did was it was raining, and the guys I was with, these young toughs in this community who gave me the ability to work there, right? I was like, I'm tired of being in the car. I want to get out and I want to walk along the oil pipelines, right? And so one nice guy, this guy came with me, and it was raining, he's holding an umbrella over me, and the steam is rising because the pipes are hot, and I'm walking along, and then, unbelievable, this one, and I didn't even know that it was a Shell umbrella. I didn't even, because I'm thinking about the guys there. I'm worried that the police are going to come. I'm worried that someone's going to just get pissed off because they don't like foreigners with a camera, whatever. And I'm walking in this very sweet, although tough guy who could have killed me, was like holding an umbrella for me, and then it was like I stopped, and there she was, and I just, and she went a few times, and I just shot it, and then I felt like I had something, and then I kept on, and then the mobile police come up and they tried to arrest me. And I was like, so what looked like a very tranquil, peaceful situation was actually incredibly stressful. So you never know, but the idea is, it takes so much energy to do this work. I think it takes so much energy to do anything really well, right? Because you have to keep on pushing. You have to keep on pushing yourself. You have to keep on thinking, how do I look at this situation differently? Henri Cartier-Bresson, one of the greatest photographers maybe that ever lived, he talked about how you circle your subject. So often as a photographer, sometimes I'll be kind of lazy, or my knees are hurting me, or I'm tired, or whatever, or I'm thinking about my son's baseball game 5,000 miles, or whatever it is, and I'm not in the moment, and it'll be like, this looks like a good angle, boom, and then I walk away. But maybe if I go here, it's like, whoa, the light's really different, or oh my God, then I see those people there. So it's always this idea of, you're always like trying to peel the layers away. keep on looking and looking and looking from a different angle, and when it's working, it's magic. It's magic because, you know, it's sort of like there's this. I've been given this gift, this opportunity in my life to use one of my senses in a way that so few people get a chance to use. You know, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying I'm not any better. I'm just saying that it's like I've concentrated all this energy to develop this one sense, which is also why it's been exciting to work in multimedia, because now I've started to develop this other sense. Now I hear things and it was like, wow, that's where the story is. What she just said is the great story. I'll never make a picture that will be any good of the scene, but you just said something that's amazing. And so now, does that...
Two questions. A picture where you took the picture of a young man with a charred goat above his head. In that region, are rubber tires the only fuel source? It seems to me it's a tropical region and there should be a lot of wood there, and why not use wood instead of toxic waste? And second question is, if you had to sum up your slideshow in one word, what would it be?
Did someone plant you in here? No. You know, I asked the same thing of the guy who ran that slaughterhouse because I was so upset afterwards that these guys were working in these terrible conditions because they're not wearing masks or anything, like not even bandanas, and it was like, that's the cheapest fuel source they have. So it's like, right, on some level, why not use tires? You know, they get some great deal to get used tires. It costs them very little, so then they make more of a profit. You know, you would think, but guys, you're toxifying the meat, and the workers but it's a mentality thing. I don't know. You know, it's hard to understand sometimes from our perspective, where we live in a society that's more organized and so forth and so on, right? You know, I mean, I hate to cast judgment. It's just like they're surviving. They're doing what they have to do. They're doing what they can. You know. Anyway, does that answer your question? I mean, they've got lots of reasons. They got oil they could burn too. But anyway, you know, that's probably it's like the cheapest, most practical thing for them to use. There's a plentiful, unlimited supply of used tires. One word.
Maybe they're trying to get rid of the tires.
Maybe they're trying to get rid of the tires, right?
I'm just thinking, why don't they use the tires as to build retaining walls?
Right.
Because that's the only thing people have available. They fill them with dirt and they build retaining walls.
Right. Right. Graphic. Right.
Yes. Was it hard to shoot the pictures of like the king, since he's more corrupt than the other people? Was it hard to do that?
It wasn't harder. It was just different. It was like dealing with a different set of stresses, sort of.
I see.
You know, like we had to bring an extensive bottle of alcohol to him. You know, and you know, you had to behave very, very, you know, respectful and reverent, and also that particular king saved my butt a couple of times.
I see.
Because I photographed him twice after I photographed him, and then I got detained by police once, and then I got detained, like stopped by local youths, and thank God we had a cell phone number, and you know, and then one time he actually showed up, he was passing by. So, you know, it's sort of like in this kind of work, access is the key. Mm-hmm. Getting access, mm-hmm. You know, and so once we had access to him, then it was just a matter of following protocols, which of course my companion, my local companion, my fixer, explained. Make sure you do this. Make sure you don't do that. We have to go and get a bottle of, you know, Remy Martin, you know, whatever. And it's like, whatever, okay, you know. So, yeah. In Nigeria, in the Niger Delta, I found them through contacts from Michael Watts. And actually, my main fixer is now in the government of Bielsa State. You know, because he's, you know, so I mean, because they're getting older and now, you know, whatever, they're graduating from sort of the NGO level to, you know, more serious jobs or whatever. But yeah, you know, often in lots of places in the world, fixers are local journalists, right? But I come in, you know, and I pay them $100 a day, or I'm working in Syria now. This guy gets $250 a day, and it's a king's ransom there. He works with me for a month. What is that? $7,000. The median income in Syria is probably like $800,000 a year. But anyway, so yeah, there's a whole kind of like profession. Some might call it a racket, but quite frankly, you know, and I'm not the only one who says this, you know, among journalists. Fixers make or break our work. The quality of my fixer often determines the quality of the work I will do. You know, and the ideal fixer is someone who can get me to, you know, into the home of the poorest villager, but also can get me in the home of the prime minister. You know, that is the most valuable sort of a person, where they understand how to navigate their own culture, their own society. And like in Iraq, it's classic. It's always like their cousins. You know, I want to go to that military base. Oh, my cousin's the general. You know, it's like, cool, all right. So then it's one phone call, whereas it's not like 15 faxes and emails. And, you know, sometimes it's amazing the way these folks can cut through the red tape.
What's the most sort of dangerous or scary situation you've been in general?
Oh boy, I mean, I don't like to talk about this just because I've been so fortunate and so many journalists have not, but I mean, I guess getting pinned down a couple of times in firefights in Baghdad was pretty bad. That was pretty bad, but it was completely out of my control. But the worst thing that ever happened to me was getting detained for 4 days by the Nigerian military. That was, you know, pretty much a crumbled mess, quite frankly, by the 4th day, because there was no sense of any logic of what was going on, and you know, I was completely stripped of everything. I mean, I was not abused in any way, but it was very frightening because there was that sense of, am I going to be released or am I going to disappear? But working in Iraq was just terrible. By the 2000, I mean, I stopped going after 2005. It was just terrible. It was like I was saying to someone earlier. I mean, it's absolutely freaky to be in a place where anybody or anything can explode at any time. It's like our poor soldiers, my God.
And you said you'd been to like...
Take care of them when they get back, okay? Seriously, seriously. Well, I would love to go to China. I've been there only once, which is nothing because China's so huge, but I mean, China's such an important and fascinating place. The world's a big place. The United States is a big place. The United States is an amazing, amazing place to work as a journalist. You know, so it's a great question, but it's sort of a tough one, you know, because there's so much. And life is so short, so precious and short, you know. So I try to now, and also because I have a family, so I can't, as it is, I'm gone half the year. I can't be gone all the time. As it is, they're quite patient and understanding with me that, you know, now I have to be very mindful about the subjects I choose. You know, can I really do it in whatever time is required to do it? Can I do that and not destroy my family? You know, like all those considerations. When I was younger, it was like, woohoo, let's go. You know, wherever I'll go, you know, and now I can't be that cavalier. But,
did you ever do any work in Iran?
I've only been to Iran once, and just in the Kurdish part. I've done a lot of work with the Kurds, and just sort of the northwest. So
you didn't get any attitude of how the people over there feel in Niger and with all the turmoil that's been?
No, I mean, but I think, from what I've read and what I've heard from colleagues who've been there, it's kind of like Syria. I mean, most people don't have anything against America. I think most of the world, the predilection is to like America and like Americans. You know, which is why I'm hopeful now that we can kind of turn that tide around, because it absolutely has become worse for us out in the world. You know, our reputation absolutely was tarnished and was hurt.
So you saw that?
Oh my God,
yeah.
Of course. What are you kidding?
Yeah.
Not only did I see it, I risked my life by being in these places. Because if they, people wanted to kill people like me. Whereas previously, that was never a consideration, never a consideration. I mean, they might think I was a spy. They might, in the past, they might think, you know, we don't trust you, we want to control you, you know, places like Syria, places like Iran, places like Iraq under Saddam, Soviet Union, I went, you know, late 80s, whatever. But, you know, then it became, in the last 6, 7 years, since 9/11, much uglier, where I wouldn't travel with I wouldn't go out with my passport, you know, because in case someone did get me, which, you know, hopefully wangle my way out, or they wouldn't know I was American. So,
That hurts me to hear
yeah,
that.
you know, but I would say overall, most people have very positive feelings towards America, you know, and you know, and the things that you see in the media, you know, when, you know, Ahmadinejad gives a speech and they, you know, burn the American Israeli flags and stand, sure, that stuff is somewhat orchestrated, and probably the people who are there do feel that way, but that does not reflect the majority view. So that's why, like, in this, working in Syria now, you know, it's like you go to Syria and you think, my God, we should be friends with these people. Or Cuba, my God, this is crazy. This is crazy. First of all, these are not countries that represent threats to us. And they're dying, they'd love to be friends with us. And we can help them so much. You know, it's really time, we have to build the bridges. It's, you know, same thing with the big, like Russia, China, my God, let's be friends with these people. Because they're really powerful. So, I hope I don't sound like an idiot, I'm sorry.
Have you ever thought of fitting a project just because of the stuff that you have been going through, like this risky?
Say that again, have I ever what?
Thinking of quitting, like
Quitting.
a project, or being a journalist, or, you know, being in this tough situations where you have been arrested and kept in prison for 4 days.
You're asking me to reveal really deep, dark things that I don't like to talk about. No, I mean, yeah, and I mean, as time goes on, I sometimes, when I have those feelings, they're stronger and stronger, you know, and it's just so hard. I'm so committed to this. It's not only that I don't know what else to do, it's not so much that, it's just that I'm so committed to it. What I have felt is I was talking about this yesterday, that like there were times when I was in Iraq, or where, you know, there is that sense of, who am I kidding that my work's going to make a difference? And what am I doing here? Because if I was home, you know, helping my daughter with homework or whatever it is, you know, being at my son's baseball game, I'm making a difference with those actions. But being in Iraq, trying to take pictures that, in a sense, anybody could take, right? You know, who am I kidding? What conceit would that be? So that's kind of like the dark, scary places where you start to think, do I need to stop doing this, or can I keep on doing this? You know, I mean, you know, ultimately I've been blessed, I've been very fortunate, because nothing really terrible has happened to me. In the big picture, nothing really terrible. You know, I've had colleagues who were detained in Africa and tortured and stopped being photographers, you know, so, yeah. It's sad to me, it's become much harder to be a journalist in the world today. You know, I mean, I think it was building even prior to 9/11, where you know, like factions in fights you're not neutral anymore, okay? But then since 9/11, it's sort of like the game's changed. Well, it really started with, well, I mean, I guess the Daniel Pearl incident was really where it, which was before I believe it was before we invaded Iraq, and that was like 2001, 2, the Daniel Pearl incident. Oh, okay, sorry. Inside baseball. All right. No, it's my fault that I'm presuming. Daniel Pearl.
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal reporter.
Yeah.
He was working in Pakistan in 2001, and I think he got a little too close to, I don't know, was it Al Qaeda, and they captured him and they beheaded him.
Oh.
and there were videos. And it was the first, and then we go into Iraq, and then it started to happen, not every week, but it started to happen on a continual basis. Where journalists, not just journalists, contractors, soldiers, of course, you know. So there's a brutality now in the world. It's almost like, it's interesting, I worked a lot in the Middle East last year, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and there's kind of like, oh God, it's like a cult of death. It's like some sort of sick, psychosexual, violent thing that, I don't know, that's developed. I don't know, you know? I mean, but you know what? Don't we have it here with like the gangbangers and guys who, like 14-year-olds who will shoot people with impunity, you know, like without thinking? I mean, I don't know.
Well, we have it I'm from Mexico, we have it
Yeah.
in Mexico with all the drug, I
right.
mean, the creepy, you know, I don't know where they get these ideas, you know?
Yeah.
A couple more, just a second.
What, have any of the oil companies come after you to try and get you to be quiet? Or
No, they just didn't cooperate.
They haven't come out.
I mean, to begin with, they didn't cooperate.
But afterwards, after this has been put out, they haven't like come forward and said, you know, we'll give you this much amount to get rid of this or anything like that.
No. I don't think they feel very threatened by people like me. No, I mean, just they're so powerful. They're so rich. It's beyond governments on some level, you know.
Right.
I certainly hope they don't want to get me. Someone else in the back. Okay.
Why did you become a photojournalist?
Well, this takes it full circle, right? No. Well, I wanted to be a writer for when I was a teenager, and I discovered stories and literature, and I thought I'd love to be a writer and tell stories and all that, and travel and meet people, and then I got to university and realized I wasn't a very good writer, and who was I kidding? And kind of in a moment of, whatever it would be, young panic, 17, 18 years old, I thought, well, let's try photography. And I went to Syracuse University, so it was a really good journalism communications school, a really excellent one. So I had lots of options within this sort of umbrella of communications and media. And within 2 or 3 months, I just fell in love with photography.
What point did you decide to do this type of work?
Well, I think it's something I always wanted to do, but it took me, a good 10 years, probably until I was almost 30, 10 years of working as a photographer, but until I matured enough as a human being to be able to be ready to do this kind of work.
But there wasn't you didn't go to someone's lecture to listen to them who did this type of work? Or
No, actually, no. It's a good, no, I'll tell you. I looked at a book by Mary Ellen Mark, who's still alive. She's a wonderful photographer, called Ward 81. And it was a black and white photo book. I think it was published in the late 70s. And this shows how creepy I am. It was pictures of a women's mental ward in Oregon. And that she had spent 3 months there photographing it. And I looked at that book. I think I was 18 years old, and I was like, wow, I want to do that. I want to delve into people, into these worlds. These worlds that nobody gets to see with my camera, and spend a lot of time and be very intimate with it. Because I'm not afraid of, I'm actually not turned on, but I'm not afraid of I love to hear people's stories. And not just the happy stuff, I like that. I like that. So I probably would have been a good psychotherapist or something. But anyway, and it was that book where I was like, wow, so you can do this, and that was it. But then it took a long time for me to mature enough as a person to really be able to do it.
Thank you for what you do.
Since you seem to be such a big supporter of the new Obama administration, have you considered doing anything that would kind of help his cause, like with the new health care plan? I saw your little bit on the Tennessee group. Anything more to expand on either healthcare or the green movement or even the economic crisis with people losing their jobs, just to kind of help this administration along by getting things like that into the media?
Well, we've been working, I work a lot with my wife, who's a writer and filmmaker, and we've been working since 2002 on the issue of the uninsured. We produced a book and traveling exhibition, and she's working on a documentary film about actually firefighters in Los Angeles and the whole issue of how basically 911 has become like primary care for a lot of people, and what it costs us. Anyway, so we're heavily involved, and right now we're actually losing a lot of money doing that work. But the problem is, so the simple answer is yes, I would love to, and not just because it's the Obama administration, just because it's the right thing to do. That's all. And maybe now it's more fertile. There's more fertile ground for those things to happen. But it's a long way from wanting to do that and actually figuring out how to connect with the right people, the right groups to be able to do that. And we're in such a terrible time for the media right now in terms of even National Geographic, budgets being cut. I mean, every week now I get calls or emails from colleagues who are losing their jobs or being laid off. The magazines are anyway, it's a very bad time for the media. It's a very bad time for a lot of people. We all know that. But the media in particular, and it's not something that just started with this economic crisis. It's been going on for about 10 years. So it's a tricky time for me as a mid-career person because in a sense, the industry that I grew up in and I have not mastered, but that I have become successful in is disintegrating in front of my eyes. Seriously. I mean, and I'm a freelancer, so the whole issue of, how am I going to continue to make a living and do this work is a very real issue. And unfortunately, it gets in the way of being able to do these great things. I wish they'd bring back, was it WPA or the, right? Something, as I say, I just want to be a coal miner. I just want to go out and do the work. I don't want to, I don't care, but it's not, but to be a freelance person, you spend so much of your time marketing yourself and selling yourself and your ideas, and it's so hard because unless you have a staff job, I spend more than half of my energy trying to get work. So sometimes there's not a lot left to do the work.
Do you have you considered petitioning celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio to the 11th hour kind of thing? Getting that kind of sponsorship? Not necessarily.
Do you want to help me?
Celebrities, but philanthropists, I guess.
Yeah, well, we've gotten grants from foundations, like the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the California Creative Fund. We've gotten grants for the Aging in America project. We spent 8 years working on a project about aging in America. I've gotten some grant money for the Niger Delta work to produce the book. So there is that, but this celebrity thing, I just don't know how to handle that. You wouldn't believe it, but I'm sort of shy, but I am in a way. But and more than that is, I hate rejection. Let me tell you a phone call I had 2 weeks ago with a big curator in New York, and I'm on April 22nd. I have a new book coming out, and my publisher in Brooklyn wants to have an event on April 22nd. And so they're like, well, why don't you find a curator or somebody, you can have this dialogue and all this. I said, great, good idea. So anyway, I contacted a friend who's the curator at the George Eastman House, a relatively high-level person, but someone I can call, because this is part of it. How do you find Leonardo DiCaprio? Anyway, so and I'm not even talking on that level. So, so she says, oh, well, call this guy. I'm not going to say his name, And so she gives me the number. So, I call him, and he's like, I'm very busy, and, I don't know who you are, and I don't deal with people whose work I don't follow. And you know what? My bagel is ready. I need to butter it. And I'm like, it's like, yeah. Because it's like, but I can't say to him, do you know what I've been through? Do you know what I've done? Because then you sound like more of an idiot. And so, because of that, I want other people to do that sort of stuff for me because it is so goddamn humiliating, and because it's so hard to get someone like that and say, not so much do you realize who you're talking to, but do you have any respect for, and so basically all I could say to him before I almost had a heart attack was, well, maybe you should start following my work. Yeah, well, great. So now I hope he doesn't remember Ed Kashi. I hope he doesn't remember Ed Kashi. But I'm saying, it's like the BS that you have to deal with out there is just mind-boggling to me. Now, I understand he's a busy guy. I'm a really busy person too. But when anybody contacts me, I don't care how a young student, high school people from all over the world, whatever it is, I always respond. I always show people respect. Always, because I know what it feels like when you're rejected. And for the 2 minutes it takes to give someone a little bit of my energy, to me, that's what it's about. And so unfortunately, though, there's a lot of people like that guy out there. So I don't know how you... your ideas are great. I'm just saying, I just don't know. I need someone to do it. I need someone else to do it. I find in general, and for, it's not just for creative people. I think it's for all of us. It's hard to be rejected, but as a creative person, it's not business. It's personal. All right? And I hesitate to say that because you could be an accountant and you might feel that it's personal. So I don't mean to be presumptuous, but. Let's just say, let me follow my line of thinking here in the way I sincerely feel. This is not about business. It's not about, I'm trying to make money. Sure, I want to make money. It's something personal to me. And so when I'm rejected, it's way deeper than, oh, that's a business opportunity I missed. And so and I'm very successful, and yet still I have to deal with this stuff. So either I want to deal with people where I feel safe, like this lovely woman here, who has an open heart and, or I want to deal with intermediaries who can buffer that. So.
And I think that's why artists also have agents, because we are so sensitive that sometimes you need that agent is like your buffer, because he's not like feeling like, as an artist, somebody rejects you. So you need somebody to be your kind of in between, and we are very nice here.
Do you turn down work because you're not really deeply moved by the topic?
I used to turn down work. The truth is that I don't get a lot of work anymore. I generate work. I'm crazy busy, but so in a sense, I guess you could say it's sort of the ideal situation that pretty much everything I do now, I believe in, because it's stuff I've generated. But like the last 5 stories I've done for the Geographic have been all ideas I proposed to them. So that's great, but the days are gone where the phone is ringing off the hook and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. So when assignments come, if I'm available, I have to take it because, I don't know about you guys, but our expenses are not going down. We're all being laid off, or we're being asked to work for less, or opportunities to work are dwindling, but our expenses aren't going down. Well, maybe gas is a little cheaper now, but you know what I'm saying. Our rents, our mortgages, our food, so it's sort of, sometimes I wonder, like in the big picture, how's this all gonna, it's kind of, anyway. I don't know, I think that picture of the boy with the goat on his head for me really sticks out as something kind of magical, the moment and the way the light played off him and what it symbolizes, even though it has sort of nothing to do with oil, which is the crux of this. There's like the rawness of being there. That would certainly be one of them. I think the girl with the umbrella but it's almost too pretty, even though the subtext is not pretty. No, nothing's posed, but not posed in the sense of would you stand here, but it might be, oh, please don't move, that kind of thing.
So they were already in that.
Yeah, more or less, and even that is sort of somewhat rare, except the obvious like portraits, the very close shot of the young man with the tribal marks. That was more like we're walking around in this area, and then I was like, oh, you know, can I take a picture of you with the river in the background? You know, but I don't work that way very much. It's pretty much all sort of in the moment, capturing the moment. Yeah.
You said in the Nigerian pictures that the lighting was always really bad. I'm assuming you had a digital camera, and how much post work did you do on the images afterwards? And do you do it yourself, or?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that the light was always bad. It was just that I couldn't count on.
Yeah.
It was counterintuitive in terms of the golden light.
Yeah.
Often there was no light because it was overcast.
Okay.
So what I meant, just to clarify, is that the light could be beautiful there, actually, really beautiful.
Very. Like you said, like in dead afternoon, maybe.
Right. You know, very rich and very textural, and the colors are very vibrant.
Okay.
Also, in Africa, the colors are always, you know, the way people dress and all, you know, very vibrant. But so yeah, and then post-production, you know, I'm shooting all digitally. You know, I don't do any big manipulation. It's all pretty, you know, levels, curves, burning, dodging, maybe sharpness, maybe a little bit of saturation, but nothing that would ever be extreme. You know, I mean, those are the sort of ethics that rule the kind of work I do. And the one thing that digital has made easier is to crop a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is kind of creepy because I never used to crop, you know, but and when I say cropping, I don't mean nothing dramatic, but just, you know, if there's like a little something in the corner, I might crop that out now. But whereas in the past, it was just if I didn't get it right in the camera, then it was a failure. Had enough? You guys are great.
Where do you buy gas?
What's that?
Where do you buy gas?
Oh gosh, please.
What car do you drive?
Well, as a friend, I'll tell you, we drive a Prius, but as a friend in Colorado said, "Oh, you drive a Pius?" Anyway, but yeah, we have a Prius, and I don't. Yeah.
Like boycott any of the.
No, you know, I did that for a while. Like I didn't go to Shell, and then I thought it's sort of ridiculous on some level, or at least it just seemed futile. I don't know. Maybe I'm just giving in like most everyone else on that level to what's convenient. But that's how they've got us. That's how they've got us. They've made it so convenient. So convenient. But you know, it's like probably, and you guys are sensitized to this being here, water. Ever since 91, when I worked on or 92, I worked on a story about water problems in the Middle East. Ever since then, you know, you go to a refugee camp or you go to a village where there's only one water source, or you see the women and the children carrying buckets of water for quite a distance, and you realize that they're gonna like cook and clean and bathe and blah blah blah. And with that, you know, you come back home and it's sort of like, I'm sorry, you can't just turn the water faucet on anymore with impunity and just let it run, or you know, like, so with energy, with electricity now, it's the same thing. You know, I basically become much more of a hard-ass parent. And my daughter's really bad. She leaves on every light, because she's 11, so she's still scared at night, you know. So she has to leave every light, you know. And I'm like always, you know, turning it off and then bitching to her. But you know, I do feel that we in this country, we don't think about those things because it's so easy for us. It's so easy for us. You know, we take it for granted that every time we go to a light switch, it's going to turn on. Every time we go to a gas station, there's going to be gas. But when you've been in places where that isn't, you can't take that for granted. You know, like in the Niger Delta, most of the time there was no electricity. You know, we relied on generators in the places we stayed, or you start to respect all that. I mean, ultimately, oil is not sustainable, besides the fact that it's not going to last forever. I mean, the whole setup, the system it supports it is not sustainable. Please, are there scientists here? Engineers? Would you come up with a solution? Seriously.
That's what you can do.
Seriously. No, I think that will be the savior of mankind before some asteroid or something destroys all of us anyway. But, you know, that will be the savior, is coming up with some renewable, clean resource of energy. Thank you. Thank you very much.